Hello, and welcome to another ABI podcast. I'm Amy Quackenboss, the Deputy Executive Director of the American Bankruptcy Institute. And today I'm pleased to be joined by four special guests. In honor of Women's History Month, ABI has gathered its women presidents, past and future, for a discussion about their experience as leaders in the industry and with ABI. Before I start our discussion, let me introduce you to these amazing women. Deborah Williamson was ABI's first woman president. She served as president from 1998 to 99. She is well known in the insolvency community and has practiced insolvency and restructuring law for over 30 years. She's a member of Dykema and serves as the leader of Dykema's Financial Review Committee. Deborah has been named a leader in her field by Chambers USA since 2003, selected for inclusion by Texas Super Lawyers as one of the top 100 lawyers in Texas, and as one of the top 50 women lawyers in Texas, and one of the top 50 lawyers in Central Texas since the honor's inception. In 2011, she was awarded ABI's Lifetime Achievement Award, which has been presented only 3 times in ABI's nearly 30-year history. Our next guest is Melissa Kibler. Melissa is a senior managing director of Mackinac Partners in Chicago and has more than 25 years of experience providing financial advisory, restructuring, and turnaround management services to Fortune 500 and mid-sized companies and their stakeholders. She was named a Consulting Magazine 2013 Women Leader in Consulting, an Illinois CPA Society 2011 Women to Watch Award recipient, the iWork 2010 Woman of the Year in Restructuring, a Crane Chicago Business 2004 40 Under 40, and the 2003 CIRA Gold Medal winner. She served as ABI's president in 2010 to 2011. Trish Redmond, who served ABI as its president in 2013 to 2014, also joins us today. Trish is an insolvency and restructuring shareholder in Stearns, Weaver, Miller's Miami office, where her practice focuses on creditors' rights and corporate restructuring in bankruptcy court and in out-of-court workouts. Trish is the recipient of the Florida Bar's 2019 Tobias Simon Pro Bono Service Award and the American Bar Association's 2017 Jean Allard Glass Cutter Award. She's been recognized with the highest ranking in Chambers USA as a top 100 Florida super lawyer and top 50 women Florida super lawyer by Florida Super Lawyers, and as the Miami Bankruptcy and Creditor Debtor Rights Insolvency and Reorganization Law Lawyer of the Year by the Best Lawyers in America. Our final speaker has been lead or co-counsel in some of the most influential decisions in consumer bankruptcy over the last 20 years. She will also be sworn in as ABI's newest president in just a few weeks. Becket is a managing partner of Becket & Lee, LLP, a Malvern, Pennsylvania law firm providing comprehensive nationwide representation of financial institutions in bankruptcy matters with a focus on consumer lenders and debt purchasers. Alan is also a member of the board of directors, co-chair of the bankruptcy section, and co-chair of the professional standards and grievance committees of the National Creditors Bar Association. She's also a member of the National Association of Chapter 13 Trustees and the National Association of Bankruptcy Trustees. She has written and lectured extensively on consumer bankruptcy issues for a variety of professional organizations, including ABI. So welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for joining me for today's podcast.
Thanks for having us.
I wanted to mention that we are missing one other ABI president, Bettina White. Unfortunately, Bettina was unable to join us today, and we wish she was here, but we will catch her at another time. So ladies, you're all such wonderful role models. You've really become leaders in our industry and have very successful practices. During the course of your careers, can you tell the listeners who inspired you or mentored you or influenced you the most? Deborah, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I really have 2 answers to that question. One is within my firm. When I got active in ABI, it was not something that was really done by firms in Texas, much less in San Antonio. And the managing partner of the firm, Dan Webster, strongly encouraged me to go to ABI meetings, get involved, and be a participant. And I'm still grateful to Dan, who, by the way, is still practicing today. Within ABI, it's all about Ed Creel. Ed is a Texas bankruptcy lawyer, a fabulous person, and he's the one that got me first involved in ABI writing what is now known as bench notes.
That's great, Deborah. How about you, Alan?
Well, so I don't know that I really ever had a mentor, but I will say that my father basically taught me how to be a lawyer and threw me into courtroom litigation the day I passed the bar. He was an excellent writer and was not intimidated by anyone. Most of all, though, he taught me one of the most important things that I've kept with me all these years, and that is that your reputation is all that you have, and never do anything to sully it. And I've lived by that since then.
That's really such great advice and rings true in everything you do. Melissa, how about you?
For the first 5 years of my career, I was lucky to have a number of strong women who I worked with, but I have to single out one, and that's Bettina White, who you mentioned earlier, ABI's second woman president, and who was leading Pricewaterhouse's business turnaround services practice at the time. Bettina went out of her way to provide me with opportunities to play significant roles with clients, to participate in new business pitches, to make presentations and be involved in professional associations like ABI, and also to assist with internal presentations to the PW Partner Group. Through that, she gave me opportunities to not only gain experience, but visibility and credibility. I do want to note as well, though, that there were a number of men later in my career as well who also were significant in being mentors, providing opportunities, and providing support.
And how about you, Trish?
Okay, well, it's an interesting question, and when I thought about it, I realized that when I started, there were only 2 women practicing in bankruptcy in the Southern District of Florida. So there weren't really any women to look to, although my firm was extremely involved in professional organizations and encouraged me to be involved, encouraged me to write, encouraged me to speak. Again, like some of the others, got sent into court very first day and been taught to kind of sink or swim in court. I also was one of the first people to join ABI. I remember back in the day when ABI was just formed, and a couple of us thought, wow, this is a great new organization. Let's go get involved. And the people I met there were certainly people that influenced me.
Those are all great stories of really wonderful mentors from all different walks of life. And I'm sure that they're very proud of you or would be proud of you for all you've accomplished today. I can assure our listeners that in addition to being ABI's presidents, our guests today have done a significant amount of volunteer work with ABI and led up to them being president. And they're also leaders in the industry generally. But my next question to you all is, what do you see as your biggest success as a leader, whether it be in ABI or in the insolvency industry generally? So, Alan, let's start with you.
So, Amy, just along the lines of what you just said, I don't think that resources matter as much as willingness to serve and to be a part of something like the ABI. I'm a woman in a male-dominated field and a consumer practitioner. So if I can bring awareness to leadership at the ABI and even being a consumer practitioner, anyone can get involved and do the same.
That's great. That's great. And Trish, how about you?
Interestingly enough, when I left my firm when I was a young lawyer, I started on my own, and I started to get involved in more and more significant level cases. And as I did that and first sat and had the first seat in each of those cases, I had an opportunity to liaise with people who were the leaders in the bankruptcy bar all throughout Florida, and to really achieve many successes that I might not have had if I were just writing motions and doing research. In addition, I've had the opportunity since 1990 to teach at the local law schools, most recently at the University of Miami. And one of my best successes is all the students who are now bankruptcy lawyers, who I'm extremely proud of.
And Trish, some of those students have joined ABI and been very actively involved, and it's so wonderful to see that and all you've done in that arena. Melissa, how about you?
I as well would mark the opportunity to become involved in and be president of ABI as being one of the most significant in my career. I had the opportunity to be involved and lead at various levels, at the committee level, and then as vice president of membership, and then the entire organization. And as Alan said, this isn't something that I aspired to from the moment I got involved in ABI. I found value throughout that trajectory and was honored that there was an opportunity to serve in that role. But I think you have to look at the path as being really where the value came as far as my career goes, looking at the national contact network, visibility, and leading to opportunities with both clients and other professional associations. I will note that another significant milestone for me was making partner at KPMG and having the opportunity to be part of leading and building a restructuring practice on a Big Four platform. And at that time, that also transitioned my practice to a
national practice being involved in higher profile matters.
Deborah, how about you? What have been some of your biggest successes as a leader in the industry or ABI?
Well, my story probably starts at the end. As you could tell from the introduction, I was fortunate enough to be involved in ABI very early in ABI's history, and was president of the ABI relatively early in my career. But what that taught me or showed me is that I could lead, and from there, the natural step was leading as first chair, as Trish said, in larger and larger cases. And then ultimately, probably the greatest accomplishment, and I give ABI a lot of credit for this, 5 years ago, I was elected managing partner of my firm, which first woman managing partner of the firm, and not only that, probably the only bankruptcy lawyer they'll ever elect. And from there, led our firm into a merger with Dykema. And I strongly believe if I hadn't had the leadership opportunities and the evidence that I could lead that I got from ABI, I doubt that I would have ever been elected managing partner of my firm, or that my firm would be where it is today.
Well, you can't really ever be successful without overcoming challenges. And so my next question, I'm going to ask each of you to discuss your biggest challenge on your path to becoming a successful leader. So Trish, why don't we start with you?
Okay. I started practicing in the Southern District of Florida, which is an incredibly diverse community. And in the beginning, when I started handling my own Chapter 11 cases, a lot of times men clients would say, well, gee, are you sure you can handle this? And I pretty much say to them, if you don't think I can, then you should really go talk to someone else. But getting the credibility, both with the courts and with client groups, in order to instill confidence in them, and to get past that, and I think once you get past it, you're there. But getting there was a challenge in the beginning, and a significant one.
What do you think worked best for you to help you overcome that challenge, to get that credibility?
Hard work, preparation, and just being attentive, being a good professional.
Melissa, how about you? What is one of your biggest challenges that you faced?
I had a situation when I was a manager where there was a partner who I worked for who for a period of time was extremely critical of, it seemed, everything that I did. And while I wasn't the first person who he treated this way, and his objective may very well have been to teach me, I just found it demoralizing and demotivating. And so I was contemplating leaving the industry. But I'm glad that I took that step to speak to a couple of my male mentors, people that I was working with closely at the time who were aware of and could observe the situation. And they stepped in and essentially reassigned me and took me under their wings in order to change the trajectory of my career.
That's really so important. I mean, personality sometimes can be very challenging, especially if you are, an associate working for a partner who isn't necessarily helpful or trying to be helpful, but maybe not in the right way. And it's hard. So trying to find your way around that when you're so young and not knowing exactly how to navigate the world of the firm, it can be tough. Deborah, how about you?
Well, when I started practicing, my firm did not really have a bankruptcy practice, and I had actually taken a bankruptcy course, not because I was going to be a bankruptcy lawyer, but because I thought I should know something about it. And so coming into the practice, it was both the firm not really knowing bankruptcy, but this was also when the code was brand new, and trying to explain to people and being some kind of presence when you're dealing with judges with a brand new code. What really helped me in being a young professional who's trying to explain to a judge the code's different from the act, which today's young professionals would never have to worry about, was, to be honest, writing bench notes. I think was perceived, certainly in Texas and maybe in a lot of other places, as someone who knew the law, because I wrote this column every month, and I read, it was there for 20-something years. I think I read every bankruptcy decision that came out, or at least the vast majority of them. And I knew decisions within a day or two of them coming out, which some of the judges didn't, which was very uncomfortable one day, and some of the judges no longer on the bench when I had to tell him that the circuit that he was wrong. And so the challenge was being a young professional with the code being new and the judges not really knowing it and the older lawyers not really knowing it, and you leveraging the writing and the reading I did for ABI bench notes into having credibility in the courtroom.
That's great. Alan, how about you?
So on a different level, my biggest challenge was podium height, because anybody who knows me knows that I'm not really that tall. My first speaking engagement, I was so flattered and honored, but then I was given a milk crate covered by a tablecloth to stand on for the presentation. So that's always been a challenge, so always make sure to check that out before I present. But in all seriousness, having 3 children and a business to run is challenging enough. And so when you add volunteer work to that, it's just another item that as women we put on our to-do list. And if it means enough, we do it. And for me, it meant enough to put in that extra effort. I do want to add, though, so I don't give the wrong impression, at the ABI, I personally have never felt that being a woman meant that I was treated any differently, which has been great.
That is great. That's important and good to hear. So our next question is an important part of course, leadership involves training the next group of leaders. Can each of you talk about what you're doing to help bring others along behind you? Melissa, why don't you start?
Amy, as we talked about before, mentoring and teaching is a very important part of what we do, and that goes for whether it's women or men. But I also have always remembered something that I heard a speaker mention one time, and that is, if you can, anytime you have an opportunity to select someone, always try to consider a woman. Go out of your way to find a woman candidate, whether it's someone to paint your house or pitch a restructuring deal. In the end, when you do select the ultimate person, this has to be someone who has the best qualifications of the group. But always try to at least consider a woman. I will also note the importance, again, of professional associations like ABI or some that are focused particularly on women like I work in terms of being an avenue to bring others along. And there's also other not-for-profits that are not restructuring-oriented organizations that I've been involved with, like Women Employed or the Chicago Children's Choir, that are really focusing on giving people opportunities and demonstrating values. And so I think involvement in all of those aspects is an important part of bringing others along.
Deborah, how about you?
I agree with everything Melissa says, but interestingly enough, I found out recently that I apparently am a very popular person with young women attorneys at like dinners after speeches and conferences, because I have no hesitation in giving my opinion on very practical things like don't wear high heels that are so high that they limit your ability to move around the courtroom or move quickly in a conference room. When you stand at the podium, Alan, make sure you take possession of the podium and you use your effective, that you're clearly showing that you're in control. Be prepared in however way you prepare, be yourself. And apparently, like I said, I get people that are young women that now like to buy me wine because I give these opinions. But I think it helps for those of us who grew up in a time when you felt like you almost had to, or some people felt like they had to almost imitate the way men acted and dressed, and carried themselves to hear from someone who is, shall we say, more senior, that you can be yourself, but don't limit yourself in your ability to control your space, your courtroom, the conference room, if you need to, and do it in a quiet and confident fashion.
And how about you, Trish?
I guess, mostly I teach. I've taught at St. Thomas University Law School and the University of Miami School of Law. And through teaching, I'm a cheerleader for bankruptcy, so I get a lot of students who want to be involved in more upper-level advanced courses. When we do things, we go to local bar events and we go to ABI conferences sometimes. We have a rule that no more than 2 students can stand with me, because when we network, if we go up to someone and I say, hi, this is Jane and Mary, that's easy. But if I say this is Jane, Mary, Sue, Heather, it gets a little much. So I've been bringing students and young lawyers to conferences for a long time. I find that ABI is a really good place. Students, number one, love being members. They love getting emails every day. They love getting the information that they get. And they also love the ability to go to a conference, to meet people, to start to become a professional. In fact, Deborah's on the phone. One of Deborah's associates was a student who I brought to the Southeast Conference. She was an athlete who then went to law school, and she stayed friends with both Deborah and I to this day.
But she's no longer associate. She's now a partner in a firm in Atlanta, but she is a dear friend of mine and one of the best hires I ever made. If I could just kept her in Texas.
That is great. Alan, how about you? What are you doing to help bring others behind you?
So, especially with women, much like what Melissa and Deborah said, anytime I have the chance to offer an opportunity, I look for women who I think are smart and capable, but maybe just need a nudge or a little leg up to become involved, more of an invitation. Once they take the first step, accepting an invitation, the door is open and it's really up to them to choose to step through it. But I think sometimes, especially this is how I felt, I just needed somebody to pull me along a little bit, and then I was all in. So I try to do the same thing.
And I know we've talked a little bit about this in this last question, but do you all have any advice that you'd give to younger women in the industry, either law students or young associates? Alan, how about we start with you?
So I have a list, but I'll go through it pretty quickly. But I think all of these are so important. I really couldn't choose. I would tell them again what I said earlier, what my father told me. Your reputation is all you have. It's all that you take with you from place to place, to protect it. Along with that is always take the high road. There is no exception for doing that. Something Deborah said, don't emulate what you see men doing. It's not going to work. I spent my first couple of years trying to act like my father when I went to litigation, and it didn't work. He was, 35 years older than me, and he was a male, and he'd been in front of these people as a litigator for years, and I just couldn't get away with behaving like he did. And finally, and really importantly, get yourself some girlfriends who you trust and who trust you. I have my own posse of ladies who I support and who support me through all things business and personal. And these relationships have been the most important in my career to me.
All great advice. Deborah, how about you?
Well, building on what Alan just said, for me, it's a little bit different. I would advise you to find your friends in your volunteer organizations. And for me, I was so fortunate that I got to know Bob Fishman, Ford Elsesser, Ricardo Kilpatrick, and others early in my career and early in my relationship with ABI, to the point where we are all family friends. We have vacation together. We go to each other's children's weddings. And so the ability to combine lasting family friendship with referral relationships with the volunteer organizations, especially as you work your way up your career, treasuring those relationships and valuing and trusting each other is critical. So I would say find the friends and find them early. But if you can make them family friends, and it's much easier to do an ABI with the regional conferences in particular. We love Southeast. Met a lot. Our families became very close there. It's really special. To the point where my youngest daughter and Bob Fishman's youngest son, I think Victoria is the only person Matt may talk to besides his parents. It's a wonderful relationship that is so valuable to our families.
And I think that's hard to do if you are not meeting people in person. And that's why ABI events are so important, because everybody's looking for business, right? So everybody's going to be reaching out to people and contacts through LinkedIn. But looking at your relationships, Deborah and ABI, you built those by being with people, attending the same conferences they did, getting to know them over time, and really developing that, as opposed to just focusing on developing business. And I think that's important. And kudos to you for being able to do that.
Thank you. And I can't emphasize enough how the ABI regional conferences has made it easy to bring the families into the relationship and not just, the bankruptcy lawyers. But first you have to be friends with the bankruptcy lawyers, and then you want to introduce your family.
Right.
And you're right, Melissa. It's one of the things that's made my life and my family's life and all of our lives better.
Melissa, how about you?
I'll absolutely echo what Deb said about the professional and personal relationships that ABI has helped me develop. More broadly, I would say for women in particular, you can't assume that good work is going to get you where you want to be. You have to understand it is an essential building block, but then you're also going to have to add to that as well. I also would say don't be afraid to take a chance. Trust yourself, and sometimes that would be even if your mentor doesn't agree with you. And finally, I would say that sometimes the riskiest decision is not to seek change.
That is so profound, Melissa. But you're right. It is. I had to think about that for a second.
I will actually tell you that the person who I got that advice from was Bettina White.
Well, Trish, how about you? What would you recommend, and what do you recommend to your law students to help them become leaders and successful in our industry, or just generally as a lawyer?
Well, I'd echo what everyone else has said, because the relationships and the friendships and the professional relationships that you make at ABI are critical. And I think that the law students, when they first come to ABI, that's the feeling they get. They get a very welcoming feeling, and they start to meet people, not just the ones I introduce them to, but also the people that they meet who are their colleagues and are the people that are going to grow up in the organization with them. But generally as well, I tell young people to be visible. If people don't see you, if you blend in, and there's tons of lawyers today, then no one's going to notice the things that you do. And it's kind of on the theme of add to good work, but do things that people will notice. I was lucky. I was noticed because I was one of two women, and when I said things that were cogent, people would go, "Oh my God, she can talk and she can make a good argument." But it's different today. There's many women practicing, and also don't miss an opportunity to make a difference for someone else, because that person will remember it forever.
You all have shared great advice for younger folks. And my last question, and if you don't have an answer, you don't have an answer, but you've talked about some male mentors, and I know, Melissa, you mentioned Bettina, but is there a woman either in the industry or in your history that you admire the most and want to mention here today? Deborah, why don't we start with you?
So, again, it's a tough question about the word admire, because I admire so many people for their willingness to step up, to find the time to invest, to do so earlier in their careers, and just so many that have done that. If I look for people within a practice, I think for many of us, Bettina obviously comes to mind as someone who started. She could tell you stories about Continental Illinois National Bank, which no longer exists. She does. She survived. It didn't. As far as showing us what women can do, even when you're height challenged, Alan. So Bettina would probably be on the list for professional purposes. I've got some dear friends that I've practiced with since I started with the firm that I admire, respect, that have gotten me through hard times. I've gotten them through some hard times, and it's critical, particularly as I've gotten older in my career.
And Alan, how about you?
Well, I admire any woman and every woman who supports other women, and that was my first answer. But I want to add on to that and say, Trish, I admire you tremendously, and especially for what you just said, because you demonstrate it every day, and that is don't pass up an opportunity to help somebody, and you personify that, and that I think is the most important thing I've heard on this call, Trish. So thank you for saying that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Trish, how about you?
When we talked about this question, I had just flown back from Los Angeles on Sunday, and I had watched RBG on the plane, and I was starting to think about Justice Ginsburg and how influential she has been. And there were things I saw in the movie that I just didn't know about what she did for women, what she did for women's rights, both as an advocate and as a Supreme Court justice. And I just thought she is an unbelievable role model. And I found it interesting that the young people today are buying the big glasses and things like that so that they can look like Justice Ginsburg and be like her. So I thought she was a great role model, but also everybody on this phone, because everybody on this phone, I gave a shout out when I became president of ABI to both Deborah and Melissa and Bettina, because I thought that, wow, this was an incredible club to be a part of with those people. And now with Alan part of it, I think that I think that everybody on this phone are people that that really inspired me.
And Melissa, how about you?
Amy, as you know, this was a question that I struggled with a little bit, went on a couple of websites and looked at lists and again, found so many people that one could be inspired by. But I now have come to two answers, and it was no one that was on one of those lists. One of them was my grandmother. And I look back at someone born in 1914 who got a college degree at a time where very few women did, had a career teaching, but then was someone who was so involved in the community even after retirement, and really raised not only a family but a community, and was someone who you never heard a bad thing about. And one of the things that made me realize is that we really don't have to look very far at all to find women who we really admire. There's someone else, though, who has really come to my attention in the last week, who I thought I would mention being very impressed with, and that's Jacinda Ardern, who's the Prime Minister of New Zealand. She took office in 2017 at 37 years old, and so was the world's youngest leader at the time, and very shortly thereafter gave birth, so became the second woman in history to give birth while an elected head of state and the first to ever take maternity leave. And her handling of the terrible New Zealand mass shooting recently has been hailed around the world with adjectives like stoic, firm, yet inclusive, equality, dignity, grace, courage. What she has done on that stage has really exemplified the leadership qualities that I think we would all hope to see in our elected leaders, but in a way that really embraces her role as a woman. So she's someone that's present today that I really admire.
Those are all wonderful women, and thank you very much for sharing that. And I just wanted to say thank you to each of you as well, not only for being here for this podcast, but also for really being involved with ABI and sharing your voices, which I think are all very unique. Together, you're a wonderful group of women, but you have these very strong, unique voices. And they've had an effect on ABI and the things we do and what people think about ABI. So I just wanted to say thank you for being here today with us and sharing all of these insights that you have.
Thanks, Amy.
Thanks very much for organizing this and having us.
And thank you to our listeners who joined us today for our special Women's History Month podcast from ABI headquarters. Have a great day.